Revelation 2313. From the 24th and the 25th of April 1942. Previous destruction and consequences. Every matter is set a certain time of existence for the maturity of the spiritual that is sheltered in it, which cannot be shortened at will by the spiritual itself. Only the human being's will is free to free the spiritual from matter or to shorten the duration of its stay at will. For it is up to the human being to reshape matter and again create new things which again become a stay for the spiritual. Therefore it is to a certain extent left to the free will of man how long the spiritual is allowed to stay in a certain form. And this will always also be God's will as long as human activity applies to the reshaping of matter and as long as the purpose of such reshaped forms is again service. Everything that is produced from matter through human will must again serve the good of humanity. Then the duration of the outer shell of the spiritual completely corresponds to God's will. If, however, an external form is dissolved beforehand by human will and the newly emerging work is not given a serving task, then this is an interference with the divine order. The course of development of the spiritual substance will be interrupted. The spiritual's course of development is interrupted or the spiritual is forced into an activity which does not serve the best of any creature on earth. The spiritual is prevented by human hand from maturing through service. At the same time, however, the human being presumes to prematurely destroy creations and thereby prematurely help the spiritual to become free in these creations, which has an immensely detrimental effect on the whole spiritual life. For the spiritual very well feels that it does not yet have the necessary maturity for its next embodiment on earth and therefore seeks to let off steam with people, which does not mean a favorable influence for them. The spiritual cannot revive a new form until the old form has been completely overcome. Consequently, a great deal of spiritual substance will be released from its outer shell in the coming time and can harass people until its time is over and the new form can now take up residence. The still immature spiritual substance, whose course of development was interrupted by the premature destruction of matter, which was caused by people's unkindness, uses its freedom in a way which is not to people's advantage. It remains in the destroyed matter as long as there are still undestroyed parts in it and awaits its new deformation. But where the material has become unusable, the spiritual substance looks for another abode. For the time being it oppresses people, depending on their great desire for possession. And indeed, time and again it presents itself to this human being as that which the human being has lost and seeks to awaken the human being's desire and to stimulate the will to let the same arise in order to be able to embody itself in it again. And this often means an agonizing state for the human being because he lacks the possibility to do so. And this agonizing state is the expression of that immature spiritual which wants to take revenge on the human being for its interrupted development. But as soon as the human being uses all his strength to get rid of this destroyed matter, the oppression on the part of the spiritual also ceases, just as the human being's whole attitude towards matter is generally decisive as to how long the spiritual stays close to it and oppresses him. The greater the desire for matter was and still is, the greater influence the spiritual has and the more it uses its influence to further increase the human being's desire. Where it is not possible through human activity to let things arise which contain this spiritual again in themselves, then it presses other creations. It seeks to unite with such and to influence their activity, which expresses itself in phenomena which deviate from the natural, thus in irregularities which are particularly evident in the plant world. Immature beings interfere with the divine order without being prevented by God, so that people recognize that every work of destruction, every premature annihilation out of ignoble motives, also has a destructive or unlawful effect. The spiritual which becomes free prematurely is not powerless, and in its free state can always press or influence the spiritual which is on the same or a higher level of development, and it uses its freedom in such a way that it joins this spiritual and wants to be active as it were. Thus two intelligences now want to express themselves through a work of creation. Admittedly, these are only ever attempts, for the spiritual in form resists them. Yet for a short time it is disturbed in its regularity, and this results in deviations which, although not serious, are nevertheless noticeable. For God certainly lets the spiritual seek and find a balance in this way, but protects the other works of creation from significant changes through such entities which are still completely immature. People should only realize that every offense against divine order will have the effect of overturning divine order again, and this will be to the detriment of people, be it through delayed growth in the plant world or failed harvests or even weather influences, which are likewise often the letting off of such released spiritual beings in nature, in the clouds or in the air. Very often human will itself is the cause that destroys works of creation prematurely and thereby even influences the plant world unfavorably, for the released spiritual being does not remain inactive but seeks new forms and a new field of activity, even if it does not yet have the necessary state of maturity for this, until it has found an outer shell corresponding to its state of maturity and can continue its course of development. Amen.